Welcome to the Jayda and Stitches show. It's already September, which means we're into the 9th canvas in our 2025 calendar unblanket already. All this year we've been making rectangular canvases that represent each month, with a theme that is a little more on point for each of us individually. At the end of the year you can stitch all of these into a blanket if you want, or you can just do what I'm doing. Use them all as individual wall hangings, pick them out 1 month at a time, and use them kind of like you would a calendar. Since it's September, that can mean for a lot of families that it's back to school. And even if you're not headed back to the books, that feeling of starting something new or learning something fresh might still linger. It certainly does for me. And recently I've been musing about my grandfather. He was, for a very brief period of time, a school teacher himself. So I was trying to imagine what his one-room schoolhouse deep in the heart of the Saskatchewan prairie might have looked like in 1940 on his first day. I thought of a deep wood table, I thought of a blackboard behind, and of course that ripe red apple sitting on his desk. And that's what I tried to capture in this September canvas. I also decided to go back to the books myself, and much of this tutorial today is me working on my embroidery. I'm going to take you through very briefly what I did for the back canvas. If you want to add an apple, I've linked to that tutorial in the description box down below, along with a whole bunch of other September themed tutorial appliques. So if you're kind of like this idea, but maybe you want to go in a different direction, we've got other ideas down there for you as well. But this is largely what I'm going to work on today. You can see what worked for me, what didn't, and if you want to give this a try yourself, well, hopefully what I do today in today's tutorial will get you there. So without further ado, let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, back to school everyone, and we will stitch ourselves up a September canvas together. For the September unblanket, I am using a 5.5mm hook, also known as an I or a 9. I've also got a pair of scissors and a yarn needle. I've gone ahead and made an apple applique. I'll link to that tutorial in the description box down below. And for the canvas, I'm using 100% acrylic yarn. This is a size 4 medium weight. I've got about 20 yards of a dark brown. This is for my teacher's desk, and I need another 16 yards or so for the frame around my blackboard. I wanted to use the same brown for both, and honestly I wanted like a more of an auburn or a chestnut color, but I'm scrap busting and this is what I've got, so this is what I'm going to use. You do not have to add a frame to your blackboard if you don't want to bother with color changing. I'll explain that when we get there. For the walls of the schoolroom, I've got white. I'm going to use around 25 yards for the walls and another 10 yards or so of the same color for the actual embroidery I'm going to do on the blackboard or the slate. I will be using black for the blackboard, but you could use a dark green because I know blackboards are usually more of a green color, but I like that old school black look. Plus I think it'll look really sharp underneath the white stitching. You need around 52 yards for your blackboard. And of course, art canvases always have a border. I'll be using red. You need about 22 yards for that. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. The canvas build is the same as previous canvas builds. It's just the number of rows in each color that I change. So if you need to see a sort of a basic canvas build a little bit slower, I'll link to the January canvas in the description box down below. And I'm going to just save you, we're going to speed up to about row 8, which is where I finished here. The first 4 rows are in my teacher's desk brown. The next 3 rows are in my wall, the classroom wall white. And now I've completed my first row of the frame of my blackboard. So remember, you chain 37 to begin, double crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook. Each row has 36 stitches in it. You chain 2 and turn at the end of every row. When you're finished with a color, you don't need to chain 2 at the end of the row. You just fasten off, turn, join your new color, work your number of rows, fasten off when you're done with that color, join the next one, etc. What I'm going to focus on showing you today is the little bit of color changing at the edge of the first, or I should say rows 9 through 21. This is optional. If you do not want to fiddle with color changing, you don't have to. You can work row 8 to be a frame for your blackboard, work rows 9 through 21 in either black or that dark green, whichever color you want for your blackboard, and then fasten off and go back to another row. Row 22 will be your frame color again. So if you want to do the easy version of it, go ahead and do that. Remember, we're putting on a border, so this is just sort of, this is what they would call fussy cutting in quilting. We're doing some fussy stitching, and I thought I would take the opportunity to show you how to use the same color on either side of the canvas, but without carrying the color. So for those of you who don't like to carry colors, you might actually really enjoy this. So you're going to need around 4 yards of frame color for the side of your canvas that you're not currently on. You can continue to have the rest of your yarn connected to your ball, and then you want to get your slate or your blackboard or your chalkboard color. I'm using black, so we're going to just be filling in the middle with your chalkboard color, but it's the first 2 stitches and the last 2 stitches of each row, rows 9 through 21, where we want to use our frame color. So go ahead, cut 4 yards of your frame color, get your backboard, your blackboard, your chalkboard color ready, and we're going to make our chalkboard now. For rows 9 through 21, it looks like this. Chain 2 at the end of a row in your frame color. That counts as the first stitch of your row. Double crochet into the next stitch, but remember, it's the stitch before the color change, so you're not completely finishing that double crochet. Work the first half of it. I'm just going to get my backboard started here, so I'm not using a slips knot. I'm just going to loop in my yarn, finish off that double crochet. You've seen me use this technique several times now. And now I'm dropping my frame color. I'm not carrying it. I'm going to double crochet in the next 32 stitches all the way across to the other side, the last 2 stitches of the row. I'll catch up with you there. That's backboard or chalkboard stitch number 31. I start that last chalkboard stitch, 32. I work the first half of it, and now I'm going to bring in my second pile, my 4 yards of my frame color. You can wrap this around a little spool if you find it's a little easier. Again, you can just loop in your color. You know what? I'm just going to loop in my color and finish off that last stitch. I'm going to weave that tail in later. Drop your chalkboard color. Work the last 2 stitches of the row. This is row 9 that we're on, in your frame. So that's the last 2 stitches. Remember, the last stitch is always in the top of the chain 2 of the previous row. So you've got 2 stitches in row 9 to begin in your frame. You drop your frame color. This is my main ball. I'm just going to put it over there to the side so it's not in the way. You've got now 32 stitches in the middle of your chalkboard. I'm using black. You drop your chalkboard color. You switch to your extra frame. So you got 4 yards of it. You can have it on a spool. Work your last 2 stitches in that frame color. Chain 2, turn. So you're going to want to move your balls around so that nothing gets tangled. The chain 2 counts as the first double crochet in that row. Begin a double crochet, your second frame stitch, work the first half, drop your frame color. Remember, this one just stays over here. You don't actually have to carry it. And then you're going to finish that stitch with your chalkboard color. Remember, if you've got a little bit of a carry, when you go to work your next stitch, just slip your hook under it to grab it, start your stitches, and then when you work over top of that little carry, it just sort of pulls it into the right place and it disappears. Now, you've dropped your frame color. This is your extra frame. This only works on this side of the canvas. You've got 32 stitches in the middle that are chalkboard color. Again, I'm using black. You work 32 stitches all the way across, well, 31. Begin stitch number 32 in your chalkboard color, and then you finish it with your frame color. Work the last 2 stitches in frame. Chain 2, turn in frame. Work the next stitch, the first half of it in your frame color. Drop it, finish it with your chalkboard for 31 stitches. Begin the stitch number 32 in chalkboard, finish it with frame. It's the frame on the other end. Last stitches in frame, chain 2 with frame, turn, work the first half of the second stitch in frame, finish it with chalkboard for 31 stitches, begin stitch number 32 in chalkboard, finish it in frame, etc. Rows 9 through 21 are identical. You're basically framing in your chalkboard, whatever color you've decided to use for your chalkboard, and you don't have to carry your frame color. You're working frame color on either side of your chalkboard, so you still get that nice color changing framework done, but you don't have to carry any color all the way through. So it's kind of an easier way to do some color changing without having to make a frame and applique it on. I'm going to go ahead and work rows 9 through 21 now, and then you can take a look at what's left of my frame pieces at the end of row 21. I have now completed rows 9 through 21 using my main ball of color to do these 2 stitches on each row beginning or end, and my extra frame color to do these 2 stitches on each row beginning or end for those rows. Everything in between is my chalkboard color, which I am now finished with at the end of row 21. You can just cut your yarn. I'm going to weave it in later. And now, of course, you want to turn and work row 22 all the way back across with your frame color. Now, I actually have just enough, I think, to do this whole row with what's left over of my extra frame color. If you don't, just use what you've got and then snip this one over here, tie it in, just finish the row, weave in your tails afterwards. So if you've got enough left over, great. Snip whatever you don't need from whatever end you're on, or tie in anything that you think is necessary. If you didn't do the color changing on either end, then fasten off your chalkboard color at the end of row 21 and 22. Just reattach your frame color, work 1 row, that's row 22, 36 stitches in your frame color. And that way you've got at least a bottom and a top frame edge for your chalkboard. And the canvas is done. So that is first 4 rows in Teacher Desk Brown, the next 3 rows in Wall White. Row 8 is the frame of my chalkboard. That is all that color. Rows 9 through 21, the first 2 stitches and the last 2 stitches of each row are the frame color. Everything in between is black, my chalkboard. Row 22 is all frame color, and the last 2 rows are white, the wall again. I added a red border all the way around, and I used the wall hanging border top row so that I can weave my doweling through. For more information on putting on the border, I've linked to that January tutorial in the description box down below. Now I'm going to do some writing on my chalkboard. I really thought of a whole bunch of things that might look cute, like A, B, C, welcome back, back to school, September. I liked all of those, but I really like that sort of back to the beginning, back to the basics idea. So I'm going to go with A, B, C. And I'm actually going to practice my handwriting by just stitching these letters in. I'm going to go with a capital A and a lowercase a capital B and a lowercase b, and a capital C and a lowercase c. I'm going to put it right in the middle, and I'm going to hand stitch it all in with some white and my yarn needle. Now, if you want to do the exact same thing, but you don't want any stitching showing through to the back, now again, this is a canvas for me, it's a wall hanging, no one's going to see the back, so it doesn't bother me that there's going to be stitching on the back, but if you wanted it to be completely blank black on the background, you could create a black square or a square in the color of your chalkboard, do all of the embroidery on that, and then stitch it down like a big applique. So that's also available to you as well. I'm going to thread up my needle, and I'm going to start practicing my letters. If you've never done any free hand stitching before, and you want to make sure that you don't cram it all into one side or run out of room, this is a really great little trick. Cut a piece of paper approximately the size of your area, the space that you've got to work in. I've cut one to be roughly the size of my chalkboard. Take a pen or a marker and then just practice sketch in whatever it is you want to actually stitch. And this just gives you a little guide. So for example, I want a capital A and a lowercase a. I want a capital B and a lowercase b. And I want a capital C and a lowercase c. I like that spacing, and now I can kind of fiddle around with where I want it inside the space available to me. Then, as I start to stitch, I just kind of keep this handy, and I keep using it as a visual guide to make sure that I'm making those letters about the right width and the right height based on the simple little diagram that I made myself. I have a little extra space on my paper here versus here, so I've kind of positioned what I think is roughly the middle. This is so I can find the start point of my A, my first letter. I'm going to basically peel back the page and kind of poke it with my needle so that I know where I need to come in from the opposite side. I'm not going to knot my yarn. I'm going to leave a little tail out. I'll worry about sort of fastening it when I'm finished. And now I want to make sure I get the right height of my A. So if I kind of do this, this is basically where I want it. It looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, roughly 5 double crochet stitches tall. So that's how tall I want my capital letters to be. And from here, I can just kind of, like, I know that that's roughly where I want to go to, but I don't want a nice long stitch. I think I want to do several straight, shorter straight stitches, just so I don't have long stitches that aren't anchored, but I don't know how that's going to look yet. So I'm going to just try making shorter stitches by using the back stitch, which is basically means that you kind of go forward underneath your fabric and then you back up. And already I have kind of a wobbly line, so all right, I don't want to do that. I will now try a longer straight stitch, and I might try anchoring it with a little tiny overlock stitch. I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted this embroidery to go, so I thought I would sort of do some trial and error here with you guys, so that as if you're going to try some embroidery, you can kind of figure out for yourself what you think might work best for your own project. So once again, I'm going to come in here. Now, I said 5 double crochet highs, so let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about there. There's sort of a nice angle on my A, so let's do this. We'll do some long stitches instead, and maybe to about here. And then back up here to complete the A. This already looks a little bit more like my A, and I can pull it a little tightly just to kind of keep it against the blackboard. And then maybe what I'll do is I'll just do only the lines that I see. I'll add that little extra foot there in a minute. And I'll try and keep my stitching on the tight side so that it stays snug against the blackboard. This isn't a blanket, so I'm not worried about fingers or anything kind of catching those long embroidery stitches and pulling them out, because this is going to be hanging on the wall. So, you know, I don't have to approach this the way I might if I was working this into a blanket. But you know what? There's a lot of different ways to do embroidery. I think that part is too high. I'm going to take that out and try it again. I want that a little bit lower. So, if you're going to try some embroidery, and I recommend that you do because it's kind of fun. It's a nice way to practice something literally on your own little chalkboard. Don't be afraid to put down a line and take it back out again, and put down a line and take it back out again. I'm going to work away at this. I'm going to film the whole thing, and I'm probably going to speed it up just so you can sort of see it all come together, and if I'm taking out something or putting it back in, you can kind of see my method. And if you want to give this a try, then hopefully something I've done here will either steer you in the direction that you do want to try, or maybe in a different direction. But I'll leave that embroidery idea up to you. Well, that was a mess. Let's try that again. It's too bad too, because I really liked how that bee turned out. I need to make sure that I keep my little tails out of the way. So that was my fault for getting a little excited and a little impatient. All right, I'm going to cut a new length of yarn, and I'm going to start my lowercase b again. Well, there you go. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. And I can clearly see that I've got a capital A, lowercase a, capital B, lowercase b, capital C, lowercase c, and it's roughly in the middle of my blackboard. I obviously had a bit of a brain wave here, using a clip to keep my other little tails out of the way. And now I'm just going to kind of loosely bring my tails together, make a little knot, and trim any excess. I don't care how it looks across the back here because this, once again, is a wall hanging. Like I said, if you don't want your sort of stitches to show through across the back, then you can very easily make yourself a blackboard applique by just chaining, let me see here, 34 double crocheting into the third chain from the hook. You'll have 32 stitches in each row, and you can do as many rows as you feel you need in order to create your little stitch work on it. I don't know what kind of embroidery you might want to include, if you just want to do A, B, or C, or if you want to do something a little more in-depth or involved, but if you don't want it showing through to the back, you can just make yourself a quick little applique. Do your embroidery on that, and then stitch it all the way down to your canvas. I've got one more thing to add now, and it's my little apple applique. So I'm going to grab my needle, and this I was sort of picturing the whole time was this little ripe apple sitting on the teacher's desk just below the blackboard. I feel like this is the quintessential back to school image for me. Super basic, a ripe red apple underneath a blackboard with the ABCs on it. So like other appliques we've added in the past, I'm just going to position this where I want it, thread up the long tail, and stitch the whole thing down all the way around. I'm going to use the loops on the back edge of those stitches so that it kind of sits out a little bit, and I will not be sewing down my stem or my leaf because I kind of want them to sort of float around. And these little tails I'm just going to tuck in underneath my applique as I sew. I'm not worrying about sort of sewing them down and weaving them in because they're just going to stay in place after I've got the whole thing sewn properly. And I'm just gonna figure out where exactly I want my apple to sit. I think that looks good right there. Maybe here. And I'm gonna stitch it down. All done. So I've sewn it down using the back loops along the edge of the apple and the top facing loops of the canvas, so at least that doesn't show through to the back. But I am, all things considered, quite pleased with the way this turned out. I like practicing my embroidery in different ways. Like I said, you know, the size of your yarn can affect the size of your stitch. And I was really just going for a look here, and since this is going to be a wall hanging, I'm not too worried about those longer stitches being pulled. But in the event that maybe you were, you might want to have considered smaller, shorter stitches like I did with my curved B and my C. This one happened the quickest, probably because I was warmed up by this point. So that might be another thing you might want to do. Maybe warm up on another piece of crochet or knitting before you add it to your final canvas. Although I will say, you saw me pull some stuff out. It's not that big a deal. If you don't like the way it looks, pull it out and try it again. That is, after all, how we practice our ABCs. And that's September all stitched up. Number 9. There are 4 more to go. October, November, December. Nope, 3. Oh my gosh, there's only 3 more to go. Wow, 2025 went by quickly. Anyway, I hope you've been enjoying the unblanket pictures we've been posting on our channel all this week. Some of you like to work ahead, and I'm always happy to share those as well because they do serve as inspiration for anybody else who maybe isn't really thinking back to the books for September and maybe is thinking something else. I know for some of you, back to the books is in August, so September could mean something completely different. That's why this year's project has been so much fun. And we've linked to a bunch of September themed tutorials for appliques in the description box down below. So if you're not quite sure you want to do a school themed September blanket or unblanket, you want to maybe do something a little more outside-y or just sort of mark the change of the season, we've got some tutorials in the description box down below that can really help you out. And of course, the ongoing playlist of this year's unblanket tutorials is also linked down there. So if you want to see a different version of a canvas, maybe you want to see a magic ball style or just a solid color canvas, all of that is there for you to check out. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy working on this September along with me as much as I did. It was kind of fun, a little bit frustrating at times, but hey, you know what? This is how you practice. You practice and practice and practice, and eventually it gets better. And we'll see you guys soon here on the Jayda and Stitches Show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have a great week. Bye, guys.
Hi, everybody. Mr. and Stitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.